poets, prophets, pundits, polymaths, pastors, and peers. This is good culture. This is a place where we get to be curious with creatives, insightful with intellectuals, and thoughtful with theologians. On today's discussion, 5 wonderful women talk about mental and emotional health. Enjoy.
Well, welcome, ladies. I'm so excited that you were able to come today to join us for a conversation about mental health and emotional health. I'd love for us to get started with a little icebreaker if you're open to it.
Yeah.
This one is called No Small Talk. All right. So most of us are just getting to know one another. And the temptation is to talk about things that are pretty surface level, right? This is the work that I do. This is how many kids that I have. This is the business that I own. But I want to challenge us to go a little bit deeper and practice a little bit of radical vulnerability. So for the No Small Talk icebreaker, what we're going to do is go around and share things that we really wouldn't typically share in a small talk situation. So maybe it's a challenge that you're having, a hope, a dream, something that you're processing through. We're not going to solve for it today. We're just going to share and hold space for it. How's that sound?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so while y'all are thinking, I'll go first. A few years ago, I had to break away, or felt like I had to break away from some friendships that were really important to me. And 10 years later, I'm reflecting on that choice and wondering if I should have made a different decision. And I'm thinking about how it might even be possible to rebuild those relationships. That is not something I would normally share in small talk.
Thanks for
but
sharing that.
Hopefully you guys can hold space for that for me. Anyone else can just jump in.
Okay, I'll go. I was going to say, not necessarily an instance, but I think in this season of life, I have all teenagers and 2 adult children. And I think in this season of life, trying to figure out who I am post, just being mom, that's a bad word. But I feel like I'm in this stage where maybe I'm just surviving, not quite thriving.
Thank you.
To jump off of what you were saying, thriving was the word of my year. And here we are approaching the springtime. We're in the middle of springtime. And I was so excited about thriving. I had a whole plan and none of it's working. I was doing this challenge called 75 Hard and I made it yesterday to day 37 and I messed up, but I'm back at day 1. And I'm just like, oh, all the things. But here we are, another day.
Yeah.
So I purchased a home last year, almost to the year mark next month. And this is so cheesy. I really want to have tons of fruit trees inside of my yard. Yes. I want a loquat tree and a peach tree. And I don't know where to start, and I don't have a green thumb. All my plants are dying. But that's a hope and a dream that I have. Okay, that's a good one.
Gosh, this feels really hard. I don't know why, but okay. I just feel like dealing with not necessarily health challenges, but trying to figure out just my body and my diet and what I need to eat and what I don't need to eat in order to, I think, feel my best. And it just feels like a lot of trial and error. But at the same time, it's kind of exciting because I feel like I'm finally on the better side of it, of figuring it out. But it has definitely been a little bit consuming, I think, of my year, just trying to exercise and why is this not working the way I need it to work? So
I'd love to dive right into the dialogue if you all are ready. And the first thing that I'd like for us to think about and reflect on and discuss is what did we learn? What did you learn as a child or as a young person growing up about mental and emotional health? And what is it that you know now? What did you learn then? And what do you know now?
I can start us off.
Okay.
Oh gosh, I was not formally taught anything about, and it's probably most of us, right?
Right.
But
Sure.
I saw the destruction that not addressing mental health can have.
Yeah.
I had two uncles that committed suicide, and then that took my parents in a tailspin into, just depression and those type of things, and not dealing with it, not knowing where to take their stuff, not addressing any of it with us either. So I think what I learned was you have to have some sort of conversation. There has to be some sort of engagement around, like, your emotions are affected when hard things happen, and your person's affected when those emotions, So yeah, it's
Wow. Yeah. I think similar to you, I grew up in a Christian household, parents are pastors, and so many good, like, positive lessons came from that. One thing that I wish we would have leaned into a little bit more was that, we can invite God into our challenges, like in practical ways, right? So prayer and study and all of those things are so essential to our spiritual and emotional health. And there are other ways, like conversation, like community, like counseling, like just asking the tough questions and not sweeping the tough things under the rug. Those are the things that I've kind of learned now. So similar to you, I learned just faith it till you make it, right? Faith it till you make it. And right now, I just am learning that God is with me in the hard times, like not always like rushing me through the hard times, but sitting with me in it.
Yeah.
And so I relish that about the Lord these days.
I think so similar to you, born and raised in the church, but also a big gift to me lately has been language, because I think there's also a tendency to over spiritualize things. And when you see people dealing with things, it was just, oh, that's the spirit of fear. And the gift of language that gives you different action ideas. Because if I say there's a spirit of fear, then we just want to go casting out demons. But if you say that person is chronically shy or has anxiety, having different vocabulary has been a huge gift to me, because the actions are different. You would go and encourage that person. You go and find the confidence in a different way.
yeah.
And inviting God into that space of not just over spiritualizing everything, but getting to the root has been a game changer for me.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So I grew up in the household with my grandmother, who was diagnosed manic depressant, schizophrenic. And so part of me saw her as very normal, and like she just tripped sometimes. And I thought that mental health was kind of not a joke, but I thought that I knew that she struggled with substance abuse, and I knew that that was a trigger for some of her mental health things. So when I was in high school, I went to a mental health stigma event, and I was talking with my teacher, who was a part of my peer leadership program, and I was debating with her, and I was like, I think that it's like all like mind over matter. Like, come on. And she shared, well, I could see how you get that point of view, but what about PMS and how it chemically affects you?
Come on.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay. And so she like introduced me to the chemical side of mental health, and how different chemicals affect your brain chemistry, how drugs and those type of chemicals affect your brain chemistry. So I think that now I have a more holistic understanding that there are chemicals that affect your brain chemistry, that there are life circumstances and just living in a broken world that just affects you completely. And so I think I take a holistic approach to mind, body, soul, just wholeness. And of course, I feel like that's impossible. It's impossible to have shalom or peace without the Prince of Peace.
Yeah.
I think similar to some of what you guys have said, it was definitely a spirit of depression, a spirit of fear. I think one of the first times I I don't know, I think had any language at all that something was going on was shout out to Joyce Meyer. She had this book back in the Gap called The Battlefield of the Mind.
I read it.
Right? I think we all probably, that was like
Yes.
a classic book. And I think that was sort of like the first time that anybody had said, hey, something's going on there, Evans, right? Like that you're having questions or conversations or something's bothering you. I think even that idea of is it me, God, or the devil, right? Like almost being aware that there was, I don't know, like what am I listening to? What are these thoughts that I'm feeling? Was something that I remember trying to navigate that, and there not being a lot of tools. It was me, God, or the devil, right? Like it wasn't necessarily anything else about that. I would say too, like what I saw, a good thing that I feel like I saw in my home was confrontation, but like I thought it was healthy. I always felt like confrontation was healthy. It didn't have to be like violent or negative. My dad was a very like confrontational person if something was wrong. So I try to carry that with me. It's easier almost like witnessed than being able to do yourself. But I think that that's something that contributes
Yeah.
to health within and collectively, like in a relationship when you're able to say what's hurting you.
Yeah, for sure. Especially when you have that language. So we've all learned so much over the years with respect to mental health and emotional health. What life event really taught you the most? Whether it was like what life event most significantly impacted the way that you see mental health, the way that you show up in the world with respect to self-care? Like, what were those things?
For me, it was the loss of my mom and my dad. I lost my dad in 2017, and then he was like my everything. And then like 6 months later, my mom got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, and then 6 months after that, she passed away. So I lost both of them like within a year, like almost to the day, and that sent me into like a tailspin. Really, you know, I think I lost the two people who I felt like loved me the most, and I lost sort of that attachment, that intimacy. Like they helped to regulate me. I never didn't realize how much my parents helped to sort of calm me. And so I became more aware of my nervous system. You know, I had a lot more triggers, a lot more anxiety that I'd never experienced before. And I realized that I had to find new ways to regulate myself and to build relationships with people that also help me to regulate as well.
Same. My father passed in 2019, but I think for me, it's hard to say the event. It's easy to say my parent passing, but he lived with an illness and he suffered with an illness. And so I think for me, it was that slow burn that I didn't realize how much a sustained witnessing of somebody you love so much suffer.
Yeah.
You're not aware, you know, it's like the funeral is like, yeah, that's the event, but it started way before then. I can't put the time or the date on it. It was just this progression, and it didn't stop after he was gone. It just was like thing after thing after thing just kept tumbling down. And I just reached a point where I was like, I physically can't push through anymore. When you know your family is like, we're concerned. I'm like, I don't know what to do. It's just, I just remember asking myself, how did I get here? It wasn't sudden, like your situation. It was long and hard, a long journey that just culminated in this state of like, I'm unwell and I've reached the max.
Yeah.
I would have to say marriage and divorce. Divorce was hard for me to reconcile the gospel and divorce, or I had a crisis of faith in some ways, just because it was so hard for me to reconcile, and because I was praying and wanting reconciliation so bad that that I thought God wasn't listening to me. And so coming to terms with God is good in my despair. It's often said, you know, like by my pastor, that life is tragic, but God is faithful. And so dealing with that, the tragedy of divorce, and just coming to terms and reconciling things with inside of myself, sitting with my emotions, sitting with my shame, my fear, and learning how to do life by myself and with raising my kids, experience some of the deepest loneliness that I've ever experienced, like in raising children. And so just processing through that has been one of the most challenging things for me.
It was marriage for me too, and having children. My husband and I had a honeymoon baby. Our first son was born in 2020 at the beginning of the pandemic. Our second son was born in 2022. And getting married during that time, being isolated from everyone, having kids during that time, sent me into a spiral. And so it wasn't my husband, it was me. And similar to you, I grew up in a home where confrontation was common, though that confrontation wasn't always healthy. And so being isolated and alone with my husband and I, no family, this new baby, rage just really starts to raise up in me. And so he is like the kindest, gentlest, sweetest man, and I was on 10,000. And so, within 2 months of having my son, I was in therapy because I'm like, I'm about to throw all of them away. And so that was, marriage is a mirror sometimes. And it's easy to say, like, look at this person, look at my spouse, and look what's wrong with them. But within 2 months of being married and having my first child, I realized quickly, no, baby girl, it's you. And so I had to really start doing some deep work to deal with the anger and the rage that I was feeling.
That's good. I think mine is my life event that I think made me most aware of the need for emotional health was in 2019. I had a child that was assaulted, and shortly after she tried to take her life. And that anger that you're referring to, just I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't know how to. Went from being a caregiver to, 6 kids, you're a caregiver. Being in a church, you're a caregiver. And all of a sudden, I was in need of care. I didn't know how to get that. I didn't know how to pause long enough to even ask for that. And then in the midst of trauma, it's really, really hard.
Yeah.
So I think that was my, I think for anybody that would have been a wake-up call, but a huge wake-up call of, I need health.
Yeah.
I need health, and I'm not healthy, kind of like what you guys were saying. I'm not healthy. And, the need for the self-care.
Yeah. Ladies, this feels like a good time for us to do an emotional check-in. Angie, can you lead us through that?
Yes.
Okay.
Something we do with MyBLVD and at our church is we do emotional check-ins. And so these are, think about it like a crayon box, like the small box of crayons. There's 8 colors. Well, we know there's way more colors than that, but let's just address these 6 colors. Well, if there's 8 emotions here on the page. And so these are just to give us language, kind of what you're talking about. We need language to know what's going on. And sometimes it's super helpful to just have simple words to be able to say what that is. So a check-in is just that. We don't fix each other. We don't even really ask, well, what do you mean by that? It's just a place for you yourself to have a moment to be able to say, and you look at the list, and you're hurt, lonely, sad, angry, fear, shame, guilt, glad. Where am I? What do I feel? And if you think about what the Lord said to Adam in the garden, he said, Adam, where are you? He wasn't asking hey, where'd you go? I can't see you. He wasn't looking for a longitude, latitude, location. He was saying, where are you? Where's your heart? And Adam responded, I was afraid. So that's what we're doing here. So I think if you guys will look at the list, I think it's just, sometimes it's easier to look at the impairment for me. And that's helpful. If I'm feeling anxiety, then I'm oh, that's fear. Okay. So on the sheet, there's impairments and there's gifts. So the truth of the emotion is in the middle. It's just the name. And then the impairments are when you're not dealing with it healthily, in a healthy way. Hurt leads to resentment, which leads to isolation. Lonely leads to apathy. I don't care. It's fine. Whatever. Which leads to isolation. Sad leads to self-pity, the Eeyore mindset, I don't know who cares about me, whatever. Anger leads to depression. I can't care about that. That can't matter. You press it down, you press it down, you press it down, leads to isolation. Fear leads to anxiety. Shame leads to either a toxic shame. So shame is I'm limited. I'm human, I'm limited. You know, that's all of us. Toxic shame is I'm a failure. Right? So if we can just look at the sheet and maybe just say the words that you feel right now, you don't have to explain them. So I'll start. So just to give us a. So for me doing a check-in right now, I feel lonely. I feel sad. I feel anger. I always feel anger. And I feel fear.
I feel, I would say I feel lonely and sad, more irritated than anger. But I guess that stands as anger. Yes, for sure.
You know, I feel healing and courage. I do feel intimacy. Got a little passion in there too. And I feel freedom and forgiveness.
I feel lonely, sad, and shame. Glad to. Glad to.
I feel hurt. I feel anger. And I also feel shame. But I feel glad because I felt lonely for a long time and I'm like, I don't feel lonely. So that's the win.
Thanks for sharing.
Thank you for leading us through that.
Yeah.
As we bring this conversation to a close, I would love for you all to share just one best practice that you would recommend to those who are watching for self-care,
Yeah.
mental health, emotional care as well. And if there's a practical resource that comes to mind, like Gnome 360, I would love for you to offer that as well.
I'll start since.
Okay.
I think this is a huge resource for me. Just to have a language. And even in my quiet time, sometimes I'll just, as if the Lord's sitting with me, I'll tell him these things. So I think No 360 is a resource that I would recommend. We have on City Syllabus for My Boulevard, there's a master's class that you can go through and it'll walk you through every emotion and explain it. And I think it's super helpful. And then we also do group processing at the church. It's offered probably twice a year.
Yeah.
So that's something you could sign up for.
I would say just mindful meditation. Like that's something that I do a lot, and that definitely helps me out a lot. And I would recommend like another thing that really helps me is almost like somatic meditation, where I pay attention to like where I'm feeling, I think anxiety or pain in my body. I think the body keeps score, and so I like to listen to her as well to kind of help me, to guide me.
Yeah. I practice monotasking at least once a day. Most of us, particularly women, find ourselves multitasking all throughout the day. So in the mornings or at some point in the day, I try to monotask, which is do one thing at a time. So for example, if I'm drinking my coffee, I'm not going to drink my coffee and check my email and like plan the grocery list. I'm just going to drink my coffee and take in the heat and the smell and the taste and just fully immerse myself in this cup because I'm going to be stretched thin doing all the things throughout the day. For resources, I recommend Brene Brown's Atlas of the Heart, where she unpacks 87 different emotions that give us language for what we're feeling on any given day. And I'd also recommend The Garden Within, which is a book and a workbook by Dr. Anita Phillips, which does a masterful job of blending spirituality, theology that's rooted in the gospel, and the best practices of mental health together that allows us to process what we're feeling with Jesus. And it's backed by like research-based science as well.
That's good. Also have gone through Gnome 360's life-changing, having the language and being able to just be present and sit with how you feel. I love that. And then I write. That's my release. Yeah, I write. My journals are full.
Yeah.
and I just express
Mhm.
and connect with the Lord in that way too.
Yeah, that's great. It's good.
It's so hard to name just one. Because I would always tell myself like it's a cocktail, not that kind, but it's a real cocktail. It for me it is breathing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I just remember so many days of driving and like I'm not breathing. So being intentional about breathing, being intentional about stretching,
Mhm.
being intentional about walking in nature. I mean, these things sound so
Very
simplistic, but they have been
Mhm.
so helpful. Resources, just get outside. Breathe, learn how to breathe. There are techniques of breathing.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very helpful and it attributes to that somatic
Mhm.
therapy that you can do yourself.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's very important.
That's good. And I want to just add the obvious. Like I think counseling,
Yes.
it's lost its stigma. I think after COVID,
Yeah.
but I think counseling is super helpful. Having somebody to process with, and then I think community is the other.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You have to have your people.
Well, ladies, this has been a rich and dynamic and beautiful conversation. I can't wait to do it again. In the meantime, take care of yourself.